Welcome to the Windows Computer and Technology channel. And somebody gave me an interesting idea that I think was kind of cool to look at. Now, I'll focus on the browsers I've used personally over time, rather than going through all the browsers that existed over time and exists today. We're going to focus on the ones I've used and the ones that were the most popular in the browser market, and talk about the different browsers that were used to go on the internet. Now, one interesting fact is that browsers weren't always free. Until about 1998, if you wanted to go on the internet, you had to actually purchase a browser. It was a paid software. And so that, of course, meant that you would go out and fetch, disks or CDs of the browser you want to buy and install it on your PC at that time. The first browser that came up that was well known was Mosaic, and that, of course, is what actually turned into Netscape at some point. So Netscape 1 was the first, Netscape 0.9 was the first one, but Netscape 1 appeared. And this, of course, Netscape meant that, at first it was called Mosaic Netscape, released on October 13, 1994. And then there were subsequent versions that were actually out for Windows. And this, of course, is the there was a timeline. I've used Netscape quite a lot. It was my favorite browser for internet. In 1998, it actually became totally free, so you could download the latest Netscape browser for free at the time. Now we're talking about a time period here from 95, 96, 97, 98, where there ain't a lot of people on the internet yet. It's something that's starting. A lot of people are on dial-up. My first internet experience is, of course, dial-up. And I came into broadband, high-speed internet somewhere in 1999, I believe, with a 1 megabit per second connection, which was so fast compared to dial-up modems. So the most famous versions that came out were starting with what's called Netscape Communicator. Netscape Communicator was version 4 or later, and that was the browser that a lot of people used at some point. And those versions were released starting 1997. Now, let's look at it in another way, is that at the time, there really isn't a lot of competition, and we're not even talking about Internet Explorer, although Microsoft is starting to think about it and implement it in Windows, but we're not there yet. Netscape is the most popular browser at the time. It is more than 75% of the browser market. So it tells you that that company had, and that browser was dominant on the platform. It was really, really interesting. It was available for Mac computers also. And then, of course, in January of 1998, Netscape Communications announced that the future versions of the software would be available free of charge. So that was really cool. And of course, Netscape Communicator 5 was announced. Now, there is a mix of Mozilla in there because Firefox and Netscape have kind of shared the same past with the same engine. So this was kind of an interesting side. Netscape Communicator 4.5 was released in October 98. Once again, very popular. And at some point, it was purchased by AOL. And we could say that starting going down the drain. We then moved, of course, to Netscape 6 and more advanced. I personally think I've stopped using Netscape around their version 4.5. Netscape Communicator came also with an email provider. You had the Netscape browser and the Netscape email provider that you could use to check your emails. You got to remember that back in '98, we're still not very, we're not using much of there's not really a lot of online email stuff. The Gmail doesn't exist. What you have is you have Yahoo Mail, but most people are using their internet service provider's email address for the most part. So they use, of course, an email provider to get the mail. And of course, Netscape implements all of that. My impression of Netscape is of a really nice browser. I remember having a lot of fun. I remember probably being, I took time before I moved on to something else, which was, of course, Internet Explorer at the time. But before I moved to Internet Explorer, I stayed to Netscape for a very, very long time. Netscape started, of course, going down the drain when Internet Explorer picked up speed because it was included within Windows, didn't have to actually download it. And believe it or not, people would not download a browser back then. Today, people, get a PC, they download Chrome, they're happy. Back in '98, you take what you have. And that was, of course, part of why Microsoft went to an antitrust case at some point because of its dominance everywhere. So basically, that's where it started to go down in popularity. People started using Internet Explorer, which was already on their computers and worked fine for them. And the AOL acquisition helped probably spark the decline and even accelerate the decline of the browser at some point. My impressions are of a very fun browser. Is it because it's the first time that I go on the internet and I find it cool? It's possible. It's possible that my personal impression of Netscape is biased because of that, because it's the fun part of when you start discovering the internet and at the beginning of the internet. I resisted the change to Internet Explorer much longer than probably a lot of other people. So meaning that a lot of people, or even my family that started using the internet, they were all using Internet Explorer. I was pretty much the only one using Netscape at some point. So I resisted that change for a long time. I thought it was cool to have Netscape around. But eventually I actually, moved on and went to Internet Explorer. That was the period when we started talking about browser wars. Today, we can't really say there's a browser war. Chrome dominates and all the rest is kind of far away. But back then, there was a browser war, and Netscape went from 75% of the market to almost nothing, while Internet Explorer moved on and became a very dominant browser. And we're going to talk about Internet Explorer, and particularly also some of its different versions. So Netscape will be well remembered, and I was really happy to use it. But of course, like I say, the feel you have for the browser at the time maybe goes with the fact that you're discovering something completely new, which is the internet, basically. One of the last versions of Netscape Navigator that ever came out to market was released in around 2007, 2008. So, and in 2008, AOL announced that support for Netscape Navigator would end. So that kind of killed it off pretty much. And, the spun off of all of that is another browser that called Firefox. And that was also based on the same engine as Netscape. So we're going to talk about, of course, Firefox in this series. So did you use Netscape? Do you have good memories of Netscape? And would you go back to use Netscape if it would offered as a modern browser rather than Chrome or Internet Explorer, or rather Microsoft Edge or Firefox or Opera or whatever? If you enjoy my videos, please subscribe, give us thumbs up. Thank you for watching.